how my jealous sister and mom tried to sabotage my wedding with a fake pregnancy scandal, and how I turned it all against them. Hey everyone, I found myself in a bit of a mess with my mom and sister, and honestly, I wasn't expecting this much backlash over what happened a couple of days ago. I just need some reassurance that I'm not the villain here because, at this point, I feel like they're trying to mess with my head. For the past 4 years, I've had zero contact with either of them, not since my dad passed away. Even when I was a kid, my mom always had a favorite, and that favorite was my sister. The moment I graduated high school and left for college, I didn't see any reason to keep up a relationship with them. They had always treated me poorly growing up, so there was nothing worth holding on to. The only time I ever went back home was to see my dad. But after he died from a heart attack, I had no reason to stay in touch. Cutting them out of my life was honestly a relief, and I doubt they suffered from my absence either. About a year later, I started dating the woman who is now my fiancée. We were together for 3 years before getting engaged a few months ago, but we didn't announce it publicly until just a couple of weeks back. The moment we did, my mom and sister suddenly reached out. And I knew exactly why. The truth is, they weren't reaching out because they missed me or wanted to make amends. No, they were jealous. My fiancée happens to be the CFO of her father's company, which owns a highly successful IT firm. When her dad retires, she's set to inherit the business. Even without that, she comes from a wealthy family. Not that any of that ever mattered to me, I love her for who she is, not because of her money. But I can't say the same for my sister. A few days after we announced our engagement on social media and sent out the wedding invitations, my mom and sister emailed me, claiming we needed to meet immediately. I was busy, so I just told them to come over to our place. Luckily, they showed up when my fiancé and I were both home. At first, I assumed they were finally going to apologize for how they had treated me in the past, maybe even try to fix things now that I was marrying into a wealthy family. That would have been an obvious move, but at least it would have made sense. Instead, they hit us with something straight out of a soap opera. The moment they sat down, they started blackmailing us. My sister claimed she was pregnant and strongly believed the baby belonged to my fiancé. And unless I stepped aside and let her marry him instead, she would expose him publicly. The second she said it, I knew it was complete nonsense. There was absolutely no way she was pregnant with his child. In fact, I wasn't even convinced she was pregnant at all until my mom pulled out some medical reports. She wasn't showing yet, but she was definitely a few weeks alone. Still, she had zero proof that my fiancé was the father and flat out refused to take a paternity test. I told her she could lie all she wanted, but it wouldn't change reality. I knew my fiancé had never been unfaithful to me, and I wasn't even slightly worried. But then my mom and sister threw another curveball. They told me it didn't matter whether the baby was his or not, all they had to do was plant the idea, stir up some rumors, and let the internet do the rest. If they put something like this out on social media, people would eat it up without bothering to verify anything. And like it or not, it would end up damaging my fiancé's reputation. Worse, it would drag his family into the mess too. That's when I realized that even though they didn't have any real proof, they could easily fabricate fake screenshots or messages. And once something like that starts spreading, it's nearly impossible to control. People love a scandal, especially one involving money and betrayal. My fiancé, on the other hand, wasn't worried, he was furious. He started yelling at them, telling them to get out of our house, and eventually forced them to leave. But I knew better. Just because they left didn't mean it was over. Sure enough, a few hours later, my sister emailed me again. She told me I still had time to talk some sense into my fiancé. She warned that taking this to court would be pointless because it would take months to prove anything. And in the meantime, she and my mom would have all the time they needed to drag his name through the mud. I wasn't scared. I knew she had nothing real on us. This was nothing more than a desperate attempt to get attention, or more likely, money. But at the same time, I didn't want them posting anything. I told my fiancé to hold off on contacting his lawyer because I had a much better plan. Going public and taking legal action would only escalate things. Besides, we were dealing with my mother and sister. I didn't just want to fight back, I wanted to make sure they paid for what they were trying to do. If we went to court, they'd go public, and I knew my future father-in-law wouldn't want this dragging on for too long. With his company's reputation on the line, he'd probably push for a quick settlement just to get it over with. That's exactly what my mom and sister were banking on. I explained this to my fiancé, and eventually, he saw my point. If we really wanted to teach them a lesson, there were smarter ways to go about it. One thing was clear, if my sister was genuinely pregnant, then someone had to be the real father. All I needed to do was find out who. It took me a few weeks and way more digging than I expected, but I eventually uncovered the truth. I'll get to that soon. In the meantime, I just had to stall my mother and sister long enough to buy myself some time. The whole thing had me fuming, 4 years of silence, and the moment they saw an opportunity to take advantage of me, they pounced. It didn't take much asking around to figure out why. My mom and sister had been living the high life for the past few years, burning through almost all of the money my dad had left them. And now, they were desperate. So, on top of everything else, my sister had developed a gambling problem about 2 years ago. It got so bad that they had to sell our family home and downgrade to a small apartment. Suddenly, it all made perfect sense why they were so desperate, why they were jealous, and why they were trying to blackmail me. They were hoping I'd be scared enough to throw money at them just to keep them quiet. Of course, there was no way in hell I was going to let my sister take my place at my own wedding. That was just ridiculous. But it was also clear that they hadn't thought this through very well. Once I got to the bottom of things, I came up with a plan of my own. I decided to turn the tables on her in the most satisfying way possible. 2 days ago, I threw an event and invited some of her closest friends and a handful of our family members. This was my moment for the big reveal. My sister had planned to embarrass me and ruin my fiancé's reputation to get what she wanted, so I figured it was only fair to give her a taste of her own medicine. A couple of days before the event, I sent her an email, playing right into her hands. I told her that if what she was saying was true, if she was really carrying my fiancé's baby, then I didn't want to marry him anyway. I made it seem like I had already made peace with it and decided that she should take my place instead. She must have been shocked because she called me almost immediately, trying to walk things back. She told me she would settle for child support and that I didn't actually have to give up my fiancé. She knew we loved each other and claimed she was willing to step aside. But I wasn't backing down. I told her I had already sent her a wedding dress, and she needed to show up at the ceremony. After all, she deserved this moment. She couldn't really argue, because admitting the truth would mean exposing her own lies. If she tried to back out, the whole scheme would fall apart. So she agreed. I think she believed she had won either way. She'd end up with a wealthy husband and a cushy lifestyle. Fast forward to the day of the event. Finding a venue on such short notice wasn't easy, but thanks to my fiancé's connections, I managed to pull it off. I didn't bother with catering or decorations. I wasn't trying to throw an actual wedding, after all. Then, my sister showed up. Dressed in the wedding gown I had sent her, my mother trailing behind her. The second she walked in, I could see the confusion on her face. There we were, me and my fiancé, along with a room full of her friends and family members, all looking just as bewildered as she was. I hadn't told anyone why I had invited them, only that it was important. The moment was perfect. I pulled my sister onto the stage that had been set up and started explaining the entire situation to everyone. The shock on their faces was priceless. As I spoke, I could feel my sister trying to wriggle free, like she was about to bolt. But I wasn't about to let her escape this one. Then, when the timing was just right, I brought out my special guest. And now, I can finally tell you guys who the real baby daddy is. Are you ready for this? It was her 56-year-old ex-boss. Yeah, you read that right. She used to work for him at her previous job, but she ended up quitting when her coworkers turned against her after finding out she was having an affair with their married boss. She had only left the company a few weeks ago, but by then, she had already decided to keep the baby. And, as it turned out, she had been blackmailing him too. She had given him an ultimatum: sign a contract and pay child support, or she'd expose their affair and destroy his career. He agreed, not just because he was afraid of losing his job, but because he was actually in love with her. He even told her he was ready to leave his wife for her. She told him she'd think about it, but apparently, all she could focus on was the pregnancy and how she could use it to her advantage. But once I figured out who the real father was and confronted him with the truth, he was beyond disappointed. He was more than willing to help me expose her. So, as he walked up onto the stage, the whole room erupted. People were in shock, and then, once they processed everything, they started laughing. I mean, this had backfired on her in the most spectacular way possible. By that point, I finally let her go, though I'm pretty sure she felt like a complete idiot, standing there in a wedding dress while my fiancé was casually dressed in shorts. She should have figured out way earlier that this wasn't a real wedding, but, well, she wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. As soon as she realized what was happening, she bolted. Most of the guests left shortly after, once they saw that the whole thing had been orchestrated just to teach my sister a lesson. Some of them even came up to congratulate me, because honestly, who tries to pull something like this and thinks they can just get away with it? I was pretty damn proud of myself. I had managed to shut her down completely without allowing her to drag my fiancé's family through the mud. Sure, if she had gone public, we could have sued her, but now? Now, she wouldn't even dare. At first, I felt great about how everything played out. But then, I told a few of my friends about it, and their reactions caught me off guard. They thought I had taken things way too far, that I should have just taken her to court and let the legal system handle it. Now, my fiancé and I are both confused. We thought what we did was pretty clever. We dodged a legal battle, avoided negative publicity, and put an end to the whole mess in a way that made sure she'd never try something like this again. But now, some of my friends are pulling away from me. They're calling me manipulative and saying I was too ruthless. And honestly, that stings. I wouldn't have done any of this if my sister hadn't been so awful. She was desperate, reckless, and completely out of control. She brought this on herself. But it seems like people are ignoring that and making me out to be the villain here. So, I don't know. Did I go too far? Am I really the bad guy in this situation? Update: since I first shared my story, the reactions have been mixed. Some people said what I did was extreme, but others reassured me that it wasn't as bad as some were making it out to be. At first, I let the criticism get to me, but then I reminded myself of the reason I did this in the first place. At the end of the day, I stood up for myself and my fiancé. And honestly, I don't regret it. My friends still weren't on my side about what had happened, but at least my fiancé stood by me, which made everything a little easier to handle. But then, just a couple of hours ago, something happened that made both of us feel an overwhelming sense of guilt, so much so that we don't even know how to process it. Out of nowhere, I received a bunch of messages from an unknown number. After a little digging, we realized it was my mom. The messages were short, but they hit hard. My sister was in the hospital. Apparently, after the fake wedding stunt, things spiraled out of control for her. Everyone in her life, her friends, extended family, even acquaintances, completely cut her off. Whatever little respect she had left vanished overnight. And while I could have told her she should have seen that coming, I never expected things to take such a dark turn. From what my mom told me, my sister had been miserable since that night. She hadn't stopped crying since she got home, which, honestly, wasn't surprising. But the way she handled it was what truly scared me. Last night, she told my mom she was going out for a walk, but in reality, she went to a bar on the other side of town and got completely wasted. And instead of calling a cab or asking for a ride, she tried to drive herself home. She never made it. She lost control of her car, skidded off the road, and crashed straight into a tree. The injuries she sustained were serious, life-threatening, even. But what shook me the most was that she's pregnant. I can't even begin to describe how sick that realization made me feel. No matter what's happened between us, no matter how much she's done to me, I don't want anything to happen to her baby. If something goes wrong, if she loses the child, I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive myself. Neither will my fiancé. Right now, we don't care what our friends think. We don't care what strangers on the internet have to say. All that matters is that my sister is lying in a hospital bed, and there's nothing we can do to undo what's already happened. The least we can do now is pray that she and the baby make it through this. As much as she was in the wrong, nobody deserves this. And I stand by that. We haven't responded to my mom's messages yet, but my fiancé and I are seriously considering going to see her. If we think it's the right thing to do, we will. Update: we decided to go. It's almost 3 in the afternoon now, and we left for the hospital around noon. When we got there, the first thing I saw was my mom, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She was beyond stressed, and the second she laid eyes on me, she told me to leave. Honestly, I didn't blame her. But I wasn't going to let her place all the blame on me either. I told her straight up that this wasn't entirely my fault. She and my sister had come up with a ridiculous, reckless plan, and things wouldn't have ended this way if they had just been honest with me. If they had simply asked me for help, things might have turned out differently. That's when my mom finally admitted the truth. She told me she had tried to stop my sister from going through with the blackmail, but my sister wouldn't listen. She had gotten desperate the moment she found out who I was engaged to. She felt it was unfair that I was about to marry into wealth while she was drowning in financial struggles. And when she realized how badly she needed money, she saw blackmail as the only way out. My mom warned her, again and again, that it was a stupid plan. But my sister refused to back down. So, in the end, my mom stood by her, even though she knew it was wrong. I told her, plain and simple, I wasn't going to apologize for humiliating my sister. What she had planned to put me and my fiancé through was far worse than what we did to her. Yes, we had shown up at the hospital, but it wasn't to say sorry. It was because, despite everything, we were concerned for her. And for once, my mom didn't argue with me. She just gave up. By the time we were allowed to see my sister, she had already regained consciousness. But she was in rough shape. The moment I saw her, my stomach dropped. I don't even want to describe it because it was genuinely painful to see her like that. Thankfully, we got some good news: the baby was safe. Most of her injuries were concentrated around her face, neck, and shoulders. As of now, there was nothing to worry about with the pregnancy. That was a huge relief. Still, walking into that hospital room was awkward. I didn't know what to say. But to my surprise, my sister spoke first. She told me that, as horrible as everything was, she deserved it. Her voice was quiet, exhausted, but she was still honest. She admitted that she had always assumed she would be the one living the life I have now. But instead, she was single, unemployed, broke, and pregnant. She confessed that she had been miserable for weeks, and that's what led to her reckless decisions. It wasn't just about the money, it was about watching me thrive while she felt like she was losing everything. For the first time in years, I felt bad for her. I didn't say much. I let her talk. She vented about how unfair life felt, about how jealous she had been, about how she hated herself for everything she had done. And then she told me that my visit made everything even harder for her. Because deep down, she knew I was right. She had done something terrible to me, and yet, here I was showing up for her anyway. She didn't deserve my empathy, but she was getting it. And that was hard for her to accept. I could tell she was on the verge of tears, so I just told her what little I could. I said that things would probably never be fine between us. But I did feel bad for her. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, but I didn't know that for sure, so I chose to stay silent. Instead, I told her the only thing that made sense: she needed to hold on and find a better way forward. She had to stop using manipulation and deceit to get what she wanted. Because at the end of the day, lies and blackmail don't build a future. They only lead to moments like this, lying in a hospital bed, suffering the consequences. Maybe this was just karma catching up with her. After that, my sister didn't say much. She just shut her eyes and mumbled that she wanted to sleep. So we took that as our cue to leave. Before walking out, I did something I hadn't planned on: I handed my mom some cash. It wasn't something I needed to do, but in that moment, I felt like I wanted to. I don't know what's going to happen with them moving forward, but I truly hope nothing worse comes their way. No matter what they've done, I'm not the kind of person who wishes harm on anyone, not even my mom or my sister. Update 3. It's been 5 days since I visited my sister in the hospital. My fiancé and I are now just a week and a half away from our real wedding, just to be clear. Up until now, only our friends knew about what had happened with my sister. We hadn't told his family about any of it because we didn't want to stress them out. But as the wedding got closer, we started noticing that a lot of our friends had backed out of attending. It was obvious that on the day of the wedding, his parents would realize something was off, and we didn't want them blindsided by it. So today, we invited them over for lunch and told them everything. We were expecting them to be upset, maybe even disappointed, because, let's be honest, the way we handled it was pretty risky and, in some ways, immature. But instead, they told us that we had done what we felt was right at the time. And if our main concern was avoiding a drawn-out court case and protecting the family's reputation, then they had no issues with it. Actually, they took it a step further. They said that even if I had gone after my sister out of pure revenge, I still wouldn't have been wrong. After all, she had tried to do the exact same thing to me, but in her case, she failed, and it backfired spectacularly. They reassured me that I had no reason to feel guilty, and if my so-called friends couldn't see that, then that was their loss. After we finished discussing the situation, we updated them on my sister's accident. My mom had reached out to me just the day before, letting me know that my sister had been discharged from the hospital 2 days earlier and was now back home. She also took the time to thank me for showing up at the hospital, for helping them financially, and for not abandoning them completely despite everything. Since I could afford it, I had been thinking about sending them a little more money, but I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. So I asked my in-laws what they thought. Their response? If helping them made me feel better, I should absolutely do it. They told me that just because my mom and sister had been terrible to me didn't mean I needed to stoop to their level. I had already taught them their lesson, and if I wanted to offer support from a distance, then I should do it without worrying about what anyone else thought. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'll continue to help them out financially because I want to, but as far as keeping in touch, that's not something I want for myself. I think this is the best way forward for all of us. Update 4. I know that not everyone agrees with my decision to support my mom and sister. Some people believe I should cut them off completely and let them figure things out on their own. But that's just not who I am. If I were the kind of person who could be cold and heartless, I wouldn't have even gone to see my sister in the hospital. I wouldn't have cared at all. And maybe that would have saved me a lot of stress in the past. But this is who I am, and I've already made up my mind. There's more to life than revenge. The world isn't just black and white. I don't expect everyone to agree with my decision, but I do hope people can at least respect it. And if not, well, that's their choice. Anyway, like I said, I've been sending money to my mom. We recently had a conversation, and she told me that my sister is planning to start looking for a job soon, preferably something she can do from home. Once they have a steady income again, they want to start paying me back. I told them I was fine with that. They also apologized again for everything. They even told me they'd love the chance to fix our relationship if I was willing to give them another shot. I told them I'd think about it. Truthfully, I haven't given it much thought, though. I've been too busy with something far more important, my wedding. Yep, my fiancé and I finally got married. And we've never been happier. It's only been 2 days, but I already feel like a new person. Calling him my husband makes me feel all giddy inside, and honestly, I love it. Sure, a lot of our friends didn't show up. But the ones who truly mattered did, including my best friend and his closest friends. And that's all we really needed. In a couple of days, we're heading off on our honeymoon, and right now, that's the only thing on our minds. The past few weeks have been insane, but at the end of the day, we came out stronger. And that's all that matters.